Where does the network data actually come from? A network model may look mathematically elegant, but if the underlying data is delayed, incomplete, biased, or noisy, then the conclusions can be misleading. So in this lecture, we are shifting from pure topology to data foundations. We will look at public data, commercial data, and synthetic data, and we will think carefully about the trade-offs among cost, granularity, and privacy. This slide introduces the three-tier view of financial data. Let's look at the pyramid closely. At the base is Tier 1, public and open data, with examples like Yahoo Finance, SEC EDGAR, and FRED. These sources are accessible and relatively low cost, but often come with higher latency or less detail. In the middle is Tier 2, commercial and proprietary data, including Bloomberg, Refinitiv, and DTCC. These are more granular and often more timely, but they are expensive and harder to access. At the top is Tier 3, synthetic and simulated data, such as stochastic block models and Erdős-Rényi networks, which give researchers a controlled environment and solve some privacy problems. On the right, the trade-off triangle summarizes the lecture's central tension. You usually cannot maximize cost efficiency, granularity, and privacy all at once. In other words, every data source comes with compromises, and good network research begins by understanding those compromises. Now we begin with Tier 1 by looking at market data and correlation networks. The workflow shown here is very important. We start with raw price data, labeled P sub t. Then we transform prices into log returns using the formula R sub t equals the natural log of P sub t divided by P sub t minus 1. Why do we do that? Because returns are usually more stable and comparable than raw prices. Next, we compute a correlation matrix, often written with the Greek letter rho, which tells us how similarly assets move through time. Finally, we convert that matrix into a topology, meaning a network structure. In this setting, the nodes are publicly traded assets, such as stocks, and the edges represent Pearson correlation of daily log returns. Public OHLCV-style market data can contain missing values, so the dataset often requires careful cleaning, such as forward fill handling. So even in a seemingly simple case like stock data, the network depends on several pre-processing choices. Ownership and control networks built from SEC EDGAR data. The diagram on the left is bipartite, meaning it has two different types of nodes. On one side are investors, often funds, and on the other side are assets or corporations. The links represent ownership relationships. Form 13F provides quarterly filings for large managers and is useful for mapping common ownership. Forms 13D and 13G reveal beneficial ownership above 5%, which helps identify more direct control edges, and Form 10K can provide textual information about subsidiaries and material relationships. So here the network is not about price co-movement. It is about influence, control, and ownership structure. You might notice how the same graph framework can be reused, but the economic meaning of the edges changes completely depending on the data source. BIS locational banking statistics help map cross-border claims, which means we can build networks where the nodes are countries or sectors and the edges represent aggregate claims between them. The small diagram on the right illustrates directed and weighted exposures, where arrows show the direction of obligation and numbers show the size of the claim. FRED plays a different role. It often provides node attributes rather than direct edges. For example, variables like VIX, GDP, and Treasury yield curves can be attached to nodes as macroeconomic state information. So this slide teaches an important design principle. Sometimes one source defines the network links, while another source enriches the nodes with contextual variables. Good financial network analysis often combines both. Now we move to Tier 2, the professional context. This slide contrasts public data with commercial data. On the left, public data is described as raw and noisy, with examples of survivorship bias and ticker changes. Survivorship bias means that failed firms may disappear from the dataset, which can make historical analysis look artificially cleaner than reality. On the right, commercial data is described as curated and point in time. That phrase point in time is very important. It means the dataset reflects exactly what was known at a specific date, helping us avoid future leakage, where later information accidentally contaminates earlier analysis. Bloomberg Professional and Refinitiv Icon as gold standard examples. Their value is not only depth and cleanliness, but historical accuracy and context. The downside, of course, is cost and restricted access. So this is a classic quality access trade-off. Commercial datasets are often better for rigorous empirical work, but they are much harder to obtain and share. This slide focuses on supply chain granularity, and it is a great example of why commercial data can matter. At the center is a focal firm, with suppliers on the left and customers on the right. Some relationships are disclosed directly, and others are imputed algorithmically. The distinction is crucial. The note at the bottom explains the regulatory gap. U.S. firms often disclose only customers representing more than 10% of revenue. That means the observed network is incomplete by default. Commercial providers like Bloomberg SPLC try to fill in those missing links by using algorithms and accounting information such as cost of goods sold and revenue ratios. So the network we see in practice is partly observed and partly estimated. Here we reach one of the most difficult data domains in finance: derivatives. The iceberg metaphor on this slide is perfect. Above the waterline are stocks and bonds, which are more visible and easier to track. Below the surface is the opaque layer of derivatives, where much of the true notional exposure may be hidden from easy observation. The slide names DTCC and swap data repositories as key sources. In this network, the nodes are major dealer banks and the edges represent notional values of contracts such as credit default swaps or interest rate swaps. The significance is clear. This is critical for analyzing systemic risk and contagion, especially in crisis settings like 2008. The visual message is that the most dangerous exposures are not always the most visible ones. In derivatives markets, hidden connectivity can make the system far more fragile than it appears from the surface. Now we arrive at Tier 3. Synthetic networks. When real data is private, incomplete, or too difficult to access, researchers often simulate network structures. This slide compares two classic examples. On the left is an Erdős-Rényi random graph, which serves as a baseline where links appear more uniformly at random. On the right is a Barabási-Albert graph, which reflects a rich-get-richer process and produces hubs, making it more realistic for systems like interbank networks. The text at the bottom explains why simulation matters. It allows us to test theoretical robustness when actual data is unavailable. This is especially useful for stress testing and model development. The key point is that synthetic data is not meant to replace reality completely. It gives us a controlled laboratory. We can change one structural feature at a time and see how resilience or contagion responds. This slide sharpens the role of simulation by introducing stochastic block models, or SBMs. The figure shows three clearly colored communities, which are examples of planted partitions. In other words, the model is built so that the true community structure is known in advance. That makes the synthetic graph a control group for benchmarking. The slide gives a very practical interpretation. If a community detection algorithm cannot recover the planted structure in an SBM, then we should not trust it on messy, real financial data. This is an excellent methodological lesson. Before using an algorithm on empirical networks, we should validate it in an environment where the correct answer is known. So synthetic data is not only for theory. It is also a testing ground for tools, helping us separate genuinely useful methods from ones that only look impressive. It is central to financial network research. Transaction-level data may contain personally identifiable information, or PII, which creates privacy risks. High-granularity data can also raise market integrity concerns, because in some cases it may reveal material non-public information, or MNPI, that could be relevant to insider trading. The slide also mentions regulatory frameworks such as GDPR in Europe and CCPA in California, which restrict how customer data can be collected and analyzed. Anonymize before you analyze. That principle is easy to remember and very important. In network science, more detail is often analytically powerful, but more detail also increases ethical and legal risk. So a responsible analyst must balance insight with compliance and privacy protection. We finish with a summary of the three data tiers and their main uses. Tier 1. Public data is best for lower-cost applications, like correlation networks from Yahoo Finance or ownership studies using SEC filings. Tier 2. Commercial data is the high granularity option and is especially valuable for supply chain mapping, derivatives, and other professional-grade network construction. Tier 3, synthetic data, is used for model validation and stress testing, where control and privacy matter more than direct realism. The final takeaway at the bottom is the most important sentence of the lecture. The quality of any network model is strictly bounded by the quality and latency of the source data. That is a powerful closing message. Before we interpret centrality, contagion, or resilience, we must first ask whether the data itself deserves our trust. In financial networks, good structure begins with good sourcing.